Good morning, and welcome to Northminster. This has been quite a week. We're recording this on Friday morning, so God only knows what's happened since then. But whatever you have been going through this week, we want to start by saying that it is welcome in this space. Every piece of you, every feeling and every thought that you are bringing is embraced with compassion, with empathy, because these are the things that wake us up. These are the raw materials with which God sculpts compassionate people, so bring it all and exclude nothing. We are glad that you are with us this morning.
We hope that while we're together, you will be actively engaged, whatever that looks like for you. And so this is your weekly reminder to hit pause if you need to. Go grab a pen and paper or your own personalized communion elements. Find a place to hide your phone or just take a second to turn off notifications for a while. And if, like most of us, you feel like you're arriving with lots of baggage today, let's all take a second to stop, take a deep breath. And put that down for a while. Allow your mind and your spirit to catch up with your body in really arriving for this moment.
We want to begin by blessing this time together with opening words by David C. Pohl. We come to this time and this place to rediscover the wondrous gift of free religious community, to renew our faith in the holiness, goodness, and beauty of life, to reaffirm the way of the open mind and the full heart, to rekindle the flame of memory and hope, and to reclaim the vision of an earth made fair with all her people one. Let us worship God together this morning.
Biblical scholars are of the opinion that Psalm 24, which boldly commands, "Lift up your heads and mighty gates, behold the sovereign of glory waits," was composed for the entry of the Ark of the Covenant into Jerusalem during the reign of King David. But its deeper meaning lies in the supreme majesty of our loving God. Our opening hymn, often sung by Christians during Advent in preparation for the coming of the Prince of Peace, was written along with many other of our finest hymns of the faith during the time of persecution known as the 30 Years' War. It uses this psalm as reassurance that our God's sovereign majesty is our salvation, the source of new and nobler life, our spirit guide until the struggle is won.
There has been much said this week about our role as Christian voters, about our responsibility as Christians in the wake of an election like this one, and much remains to be said. But in a week with as much noise as this one, it is essential that we seize the opportunity to seek out calm and stillness, to turn off the news, to put down the phone, to step outside or take in some artwork or light a candle. We are called to love our neighbors, to love our world by doing justice and loving mercy and walking in humility. But we cannot love our neighbor as ourselves if we have not taken the time to know ourselves, to train our eyes to see in us what God sees in us. And in a week like this one, when there are so many different feelings begging to be felt, we each have work to do in knowing ourselves so that we can respond more compassionately to one another. We are so much more prone to pushing away our feelings than we are to actually feeling them. And when we neglect to feel our feelings, we are that much less capable of doing justice and loving mercy and walking in humility. Our unfelt feelings and the stories of resentment and anger they induce get in the way. And so to lead us in that direction, this morning I'll read a centering down prayer by Howard Thurman. In it, he walks through several questions that are key to that self-knowledge. And while you may not have time to consider them each deeply here in this moment, I encourage you to make note of them and return to them when you're able to find time in the coming days for stillness and silence. This is where the transformation of the world begins. So join me now in this prayer from Howard Thurman's Meditations of the Heart. How good it is to center down, to sit quietly and see one's self pass by. The streets of our minds seethe with endless traffic. Our spirits resound with clashing, with noisy silences, while something deep within hungers and thirsts for the still moment and the resting lull. With full intensity, we seek, ere thicket passes, a fresh sense of order in our living, a direction, a strong, sure purpose that will structure our confusion and bring meaning in our chaos. We look at ourselves in this waiting moment, the kinds of people we are. The questions persist. What are we doing with our lives? What are the motives that order our days? What is the end of our doings? What are we trying to do? Where are we trying to go? Where do we put the emphasis, and where are our values focused? For what end do we make sacrifices? Where is my treasure, and what do I love most in life? What do I hate most in life, and to what am I true? Over and over, the questions beat upon the waiting moment. As we listen, floating up through all of the jangling echoes of our turbulence, there is a sound of another kind, a deeper note which only the stillness of the heart makes clear. It moves directly to the core of our being. Our questions answered, our spirits refreshed, and we move back into the traffic of our daily round with the peace of the eternal in our step. How good it is to center down. Amen.
This morning's reading is from the first book of Samuel. The people of Israel have grown weary of their responsibility of governing themselves. They want a system that is simpler and easier and ask less of them, someone who will fight on their behalf. So they come to God's prophet with a request that would change everything. Hear now this reading from 1 Samuel chapter 8. When the prophet Samuel grew old, the body of elders of Israel came to him and said, "Appoint a king to lead us, as all the other nations do." This made Samuel upset, so he prayed to Yahweh. Yahweh, however, responded, "Give to the people whatever they ask for. They are not rejecting you. They are rejecting me as their king. They've done this ever since the day I brought them up out of Egypt. They desert me and worship other gods, as they are doing to you. Listen to them carefully, but warn them solemnly and let them know what will happen if they have a king over them." Samuel went back to those who had asked for a king and told them what Yahweh said. He told them, "This is the type of the king that will rule over you. Your king will take youths and make them serve as charioteers or with the cavalry, while others will be made to run in front of the chariots. Your king will appoint some of them commanders of troops of 1,000 and divisions of 100. Others will be forced to plow and harvest the royal fields. Still, others will work making weapons of war and equipment for chariots. Your daughters will be taken as cooks, bakers, and makers of perfume. Your king will take the best of your fields, your vineyards, and your olive groves, and give them to various governing officials and attendants. You will have to give parts of your crops and your vineyards for the king to use these funds in support of the eunuchs and slaves. The king will take your workers, your best cattle, and donkeys and take them for his personal use. Your king will take 1/10 of your flocks, and you, yourselves, who are now free people, will become like slaves. On that day, people of Israel, you will cry out against the very king you chose. And on that day, it will be on your shoulders. The people refused to listen to Samuel's warning and insisted, "No, we must have a king over us. Then we will be like other nations who have kings to lead us in warfare and to fight our battles." After Samuel listened to that, all the people said, "He relayed it to Yahweh." Yahweh responded, "The choice is theirs. Give them a king."
I had never been to Washington, D.C. before. So when the Alliance of Baptists decided to hold their annual gathering there last year, I jumped on the chance to go. Did you know that there are nearly 100 museums there, not even to mention the landmarks and the memorials? We saw all kinds of incredible things, but there's this one image that keeps coming back to me, one piece of art that I've thought of over and over. The day we toured the U.S. Capitol building, we were split up into groups of about a dozen. We were each given headsets to listen to our soft-spoken tour guide as he led us through the sprawling campus. When we entered the Capitol's rotunda, that iconic cast-iron dome towering above the city, our tour guide instructed us to look up. Now, I've probably seen that dome hundreds of times in movies or on TV, but I'd never seen it from the inside. As we looked up through the oculus of the dome, we saw 180 feet above our heads an enormous fresco covering nearly 5,000 square feet. It was a religious piece, something I'd expect to see in the Vatican, but not in the heart of our nation's capital. It was a painting of a circle of celestial figures, 15 feet tall, holding a divine council. I saw the goddess of liberty and the goddess of victory. I saw several tableaus featuring the gods of war, science, marine, commerce, mechanics, and agriculture. And sitting in the middle, adorned in purple robes, was George Washington. Painted in the mid-1800s, our tour guide quietly explained, this piece took nearly 11 months to complete. As you can see, it depicts President Washington seated in his place among various heavenly figures. The title of this piece, he informed us, is The Apotheosis of Washington. Well, I looked over at him and wondered if maybe I'd misunderstood. I don't remember all that much from my one required semester of Greek, but theosis is not a word you forget. It means to make someone into a god. So the title of this piece, in other words, was Washington Raised to Godhood. Well, I stood there looking up in awe, my "thou shalt have no other gods before me" alarm going off in my head. And I realized that the building in which we stood was as much as anything else, a temple. Before we moved on, I gave Washington one last look, and I thought, this is not how a democracy treats a president. This is how a monarchy treats a king. Now, I knew about Washington refusing a third term despite pressure to stay in office, helping set the precedent that the office is more important than the personality occupying it. But there were other things I didn't know. Until that tour, I didn't know that the earliest drafts of the president's residence didn't refer to it as the White House, but the palace. I didn't know that from the very early days of our founding, there was a push by some to crown George Washington as the King of the United States, a push from which Washington recoiled in horror. in a nation founded on principles of democracy and freedom, in a nation where the leaders work for and answer to the people, there is no room for a king. And yet, like Israel of old, there is something in us that cries out for a king, just the same. Thousands of years before the advent of the United States, the children of Israel, a loose confederation of tribes, were learning how to govern themselves. Having been set free from Egypt's tyrannical monarchy, God set before them this radically new option. "I will be your God," the voice told them from Sinai's summit, "and you will be my people. I will dwell not in some far-off place, but among you. I will speak not through some priest, but to you." And to that offer, the people said, "No." "What?" I can imagine Moses asking, baffled. "Why?" "Well, because it's too much," Israel said. "It scares us. It intimidates us. You speak to God, and we will listen to what you say God says. Be a mediator for us, just like other nations have." "But a mediator will obscure God's presence," I can imagine Moses protesting. "They'll skew God's words towards their own interest. They'll abuse their priestly position. You, who are now free to commune with God, are giving up your own freedom. Mark my words. Soon you will cry out against the priests and false prophets that you have chosen. But on that day, it will be on your shoulders." But his words fell on deaf ears. So God said, "The choice is theirs. Give them a priest." And we know how it went from there. Again, many years later, the story would play out again. Having established themselves in a region, God set before them this radically new option. "I will be your king," God had said. "Every tribe, community, and individual will answer directly to me and live by our covenant. You will answer not to some power-hungry monarch, but to my commandments written on your hearts." And to that offer, the people said, "No." "What?" Samuel asked, baffled. "Why?" "Well, because it's just too much," Israel said again. "It scares us. It intimidates us. It would be much easier for you just to give us a king to rule over us, as other nations have. Give us someone who will tell us what to think and what to do, someone who will bring order and unity. But a king will take your children and make servants of them," Samuel protested. "They'll take your best fields for their own use. They'll abuse their power. You, who are now a free people, are giving up your own freedom. Mark my words, soon you will cry out against this very king that you have chosen, but on that day, it will be on your shoulders." But his words fell on deaf ears. So God said, "The choice is theirs. Give them a king." And we know how it went from there. The story plays out again and again and again. Freedom, you see, means responsibility. But there is something in us that fears that responsibility. It's intimidated by it. There is something in us that would rather cry out for a king. Eric Bridges, in a piece written for Baptist News Global, wrote, "It's almost always unwise to compare modern nation-states to ancient Israel. Still, one parallel between ancient Israel and modern democracies is irresistible. The Israelites of Samuel's time did not lose their freedom to outside forces, despite their constant conflict with invaders. They gave it up willingly, even eagerly. They wanted someone to tell them what to think and what to do, to bring order. A king, they thought, would solve everything. Except, of course, that's not true. Moses knew that. Samuel knew that. Washington and the founders knew that. A king is not a shortcut because there are no shortcuts. Freedom means doing our work. If I'm honest, this story has hit me hard the past several days because I've recognized that during this election season, this is exactly what I've been doing. I'm hiding and I'm crying out for a king. Deep down, I know that my call is to serve my neighbors, to have hard conversations with my neighbors. It's to engage people who disagree with me about LGBTQ rights, about a woman's right to choose, about racial reconciliation. I know that my call is to listen well, to speak empathetically and honestly, because that is how minds are changed. I know that my call is to think local, to get in touch with the culture of my own city and state, and advocate for policies and leadership who will practice the kind of freedom that I believe in here, where it's achievable. I know that my call is to criticize the bad through the practice of the better. But that is hard, and it's intimidating, and it is much easier to cry out for a king. It's easier to cry out for someone to fight for me, to do the work for me. It's easier to obsess over a presidential election as though if my champion won, everything would be okay. As though I wouldn't still have to share this nation with the 50% who bitterly disagree with me, who will not be silenced, and who are not going anywhere. So I cry out for a king, in the false hope that if they win, I won't have to do my own work. And these stories that we've read tell me that I'm probably not the only one. Now, please don't misunderstand me. The office of the president is important. It is important who holds that office, who commands the armed forces, who appoints the heads of federal agencies, who implements and enforces laws written by Congress. This is not a Jesus take the wheel, whoever wins, God is still king kind of sermon. It is the opposite. What I'm saying is that whether your candidate wins or whether your candidate loses, you are not electing a king. What I'm saying is that we must never avoid the work that at the end of the day, a king cannot do for us. It is ours and ours alone to do. Claiming that God is our king does not release us of responsibility. It is a commitment to the service of love and justice. But I will admit to you that I have not followed this wisdom. I have for far too long acted to trade the work of my freedom for the lure of simplicity. I have obsessed over one position, hoping that someone will fight my battles for me. I'll admit to you that I don't know the names of our local representatives. I don't know the names of our city council people. I'm not aware of what our mayor really even does, or what, if any, non-discrimination policies are in place in this town that I live in. I do not regularly read about these things or converse with leaders and citizens who I know disagree with me. And that is not acceptable. I have not been practicing politics worthy of the gospel. And I have instead hidden behind the cry for a king. And again, I suspect I'm not alone in that. So if over the past week you have found yourself feeling disproportionately helpless or relieved or overwhelmed, as I have, then let's take it as a sign. May it be a sign that we have lost sight of what is ours to do, that we've lost sight of the power and the freedom that we truly have if we'll only claim it. Because I am not helpless, and neither are you. It is important who sits in that office, but it is far from the most important fight. It is imperative that we find the courage together to embody our values here, to allow God to work and heal through us here on the ground level, starting with whatever is right in front of us in this season, wherever we are. So, people of God, may we heed the warnings of Moses and Samuel. May we heed the warnings of Washington and our founders. May we be a people dissatisfied with kings, with political parties, with easy answers and shortcuts, unintimidated by what is ours to do. May we be a community of prophets animated by nothing less than the Pentecost spirit burning at our core. May we recognize that within us that cries out for a king. And may we say, no. Amen.
This is the table that reminds us who we really are. When Christ sat at his Passover table so many years ago, he sat there with a tax collector, with a political zealot, with a humble fisherman. He sat there with the very one who would take his life, and yet he excluded not one.
This is the table where he took the bread, gave thanks, and broke it, saying this was his body, broken for all of us. This is the table where he took the wine, gave thanks, and poured it, saying that this was the new covenant, sealed in his poured out life. He shared the meal with them because he knew what we so often forget.
He knew we are made of the same dust, that we have the same Spirit of God breathing in our lungs. In spite of the stories we tell about ourselves and who we are, or the stories we tell about others and how they're better than or less than, no matter the ways the world has hurt us or how we react by hurting others.
He knew that under all the stories, we are one body, and each of us is unconditionally worthy of love. We might forget that, but Christ does not.
So around this table, we train our eyes to see as his do. We train our heart to love as his does. We are invited to a foretaste of the great reconciling banquet that awaits us all. Amen.
Amen.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. For thine is the kingdom, the power, and the glory forever. Amen.
Thank you for being with us this morning. In just a minute, we'll sing a closing hymn and give our benediction, but first, we have a few announcements.
First, we are excited to be able to invite you to join us this afternoon for our first in-person gathering since March. We will gather outdoors on the back lawn of the church at 4 p.m. for a quiet, simple, socially distanced service. Check your inbox if you haven't seen the email with more info about safety protocols, and we will look forward to seeing you in person this afternoon. Second, I want to extend an invitation to anyone who hasn't already signed up to contribute to our Advent collection of reflections on the theme of waiting. We'll be sending out a daily online devotional of sorts, digital version of the Advent booklets that Northminster has done in the past. And we're looking for written pieces as well as videos of you singing or playing, reciting, acting, reading, wherever you want to take the theme of waiting this year. We would love to have you contribute. So check the newsletter for more info there. And finally, as we say every week, if you believe in Northminster's work to continue creating spaces like this one, spaces that challenge, encourage, and unify, please consider taking a moment to give by scanning the QR code on the screen, or you can always give at northmin.org/give.
Now, before I offer our benediction, let's join together in a closing hymn.
We close our service with the singing of a hymn written by a graduating seminarian, Ernest Schifflith, on the cusp of an active ministry, establishing churches in Europe and doing relief work during World War I. It is a prayer for leadership from our sovereign God, not to do the work of justice, a peace for us, but to lead us in that work that we, God's hands and feet on this earth, must do. To bring about God's dominion in which all will live with hearts set free to love and to serve each other for the rest of eternity.
And now, people of God, receive this benediction, again based on the wisdom of the Talmud. Do not be daunted by the enormity of the world's grief. Do justice today. Love mercy today. Walk humbly today. You are not obligated to complete the work, but neither are you free to abandon it. You are seen and you are loved. Go in peace.
He shall